Hello, I'm Emmanuel, and today we're going to discuss tariffs. This is not an all-inclusive coverage of the subject that would take at least a couple lifetimes. Tariffs have existed for a very long time. Many governments have used them throughout history. To narrow our focus, we will cover a few topics. What are the trade-offs of reshoring production to the US? What does resilience do for an entrepreneur? How does a sudden tariff disrupt small business? What happens to long-term growth plans? How does government disproportionately impact small and large business with policy? Today is November 30th, 2025. Tariffs are in debate because the current administration has lived up to their campaign promise and has implemented sweeping, changing, inconsistent tariffs on many imports. Small businesses and low-income earners are feeling it in their wallets. Everything from groceries to cars have increased in price. The president says that tariffs will bring manufacturing back to America. The truth is that it will take more than fiscal policy to bring manufacturing, as well as other jobs, to America. He claims that the foreign governments and their people will pay the cost. This ignores how a tariff fundamentally changes the price of a good. Beth Beneke provides a heartfelt testimony to support my claim that it will take more than money to bring jobs to America. Gene Grossman and Elhanan Heltman did a case study titled When Tariffs Disrupt Global Supply Chains. Their research shows that a tariff is costly in many ways beyond a price hike on a product. Kimberly Klausing and Mary Lovely give a great explanation of tariffs, how they impact supply and demand, the deficit, and result in a loss of GDP overall. They compare tariffs to a consumption tax. These types of taxes are regressive. That is, they primarily impact lower income earners, whereas progressive taxes increase with income and can affect high income earners equally. Small businesses are feeling tariffs more than large businesses. When a small business has their supply chain interrupted, it can be an all or nothing, complete and total hit. A large business has more money and may have tools and experience to assist them through turbulence. Scott McDonald says there are national security factors to the tariff question. Tangible military equipment could be impossible to source without the current open market. Intangible cybersecurity concerns. If network equipment is built, programmed, and tested in another country, how can we be sure that each item is safe? But he agrees, tariffs are not the only piece to the solution. Labor shortages affect all markets. Who will work in these factories? What about the energy to power the factory? How about the robotic technology that needs to be implemented? A recession is 2 quarters in a row where the GDP reported is a drop. Now this week, the president's not reporting GDP. A tariff is a tax on an imported good or service. Sometimes it's called a duty tax or a customs tax. It's collected when the good or service enters the country. They pay the government directly at that time. Tariffs are used by the government to influence the economy. They can be used to collect revenues for the government. They may be used to protect a critical industry. They might be used to influence business to build in the country. Today, they are considered an aggressive type of tax. The burden is felt mostly by low to middle income earners. The tariff cost is added to the product when sold. The final value price includes the cost of the tariff. The end consumer must pay the added cost to get the good or service. On the left is a standard supply-demand graph. Most of us are familiar with this basic concept. The market has many potential buyers and sellers. Demand for a good or service starts high. Sellers can charge more when supply is low. Not all buyers can afford a high price. As price comes down, usually with an increase of supply, they meet at an equilibrium where supply matches demand and price fits the quantity being produced. Sorry about that. One more. Yep. The graph on the right, provided by Klausing and Lovely in their policy brief, why Trump's tariff proposals would harm working Americans, introduces a tariff to the equation. If a seller can sell more of a good than is demanded, then there is producer surplus. If there are more potential buyers that would buy a good or service if the price was different, then there's a consumer surplus. A tariff increases the price of a product. This creates societal loss because buyers are no longer getting a good that they previously could have. It generates revenue, but potentially costs companies the opportunity to sell. They have the means to sell, but they're stunted by a tariff. So, consumers and companies are both hurt by a tariff. Now, if the goal genuinely is to incentivize production inside the country, let's look at those sections A, B, and C. A new entrant would need confidence that they could build a plant, hire employees, train them, find buyers, produce a product, and get it to the consumer to chase the margin that's created by these sections. You'll have to make it cheaper in-house, cover this gap, and hope that the tariff remains, because if the tariff is lifted, those outside players can re-enter and take the margin back. Then you lose everything that was risked. Tariff policy can apparently change daily. Please see current administration. So let's dig into trade-offs further. What are the operational and financial trade-offs of reshoring production to the U.S. versus continuing with overseas manufacturing? We have labor, energy, and housing here. And I have a brief personal testimony to this subject. I am a commercial electrician in my third year of training with IBEW 1253. I finished working at Sappy Paper Mill, Somerset, in June 2025. We were rebuilding an entire paper machine, demo through construction. It was a huge project, $1 billion or more. You could not source enough electricians, nor other trade workers, from Maine alone to do this job. It took international trade workers to do some parts of it. There wasn't enough rental housing available to temporarily house all the workers. The transformer feeding the plant blew at one point. There weren't enough local places to source food and other needs. There wasn't enough room to park. There were reports of drinking, drugs, and criminal activities such as theft and vandalism. These are just a few things that I personally saw on the project. The project was supposed to be around $500 million, take about 4 months. Final figures have not been released, but I would estimate it was about $1.25 billion, and the final tuning of the machine was not completed for about 8 months. These things are not as easy as they might be made out to be. The operational and financial trade-offs are many, some obvious, some less so. The first issue is, who's going to work in the factory? The factory would need to be placed somewhere where it can attract enough skilled workers to operate. The infrastructure of the town feeding a factory has to exist before a plant is built. This is 2 parts. There's all the facilities that are needed to support the people that work there, and then there's the energy grid that powers it. More on the grid later. The IBEW, military, and colleges are all reporting falling numbers with recruiting. The education system is not able to produce the quality necessary. Falling birth rates are also a problem. There aren't enough workers, and they're doing too many jobs. How will a plant operate at all? Building a plant or factory takes time. Estimates on the low end are about 1 year. The more realistic estimates aim 18 to 24 months. That's just for the building machines. The construction companies, unions, trade workers, everyone that's involved to do this type of project, they can only be in one place at a time. Multiple being built at the same time seems a stretch. Then you have to hire and train a team. Who is hiring and who's training for these roles, though? It would take someone that knows how to run a factory to hire for one. Beth Beneke said that during her debate on whether to build a production facility in the United States or continue offshoring, that she couldn't find people to run the production division. Since manufacturing is mostly done overseas, the know-how and experience is also overseas. You might be able to attract them to move to the U.S. to run your plant. You will likely have to pay more to attract them and bridge the language gap. There is an experience and skill gap for line workers as well. The skills required cannot be taught overnight. It takes time to build up the skill to match competitors. Every job takes skill. It is likely that this hypothetical plant is running all green recruits with little to no experience in manufacturing. I wouldn't put my money on the local Little League team beating a Major League team. I wouldn't bet on the brand new production facility workers to be more productive than their experienced counterparts overseas. You know what else this factory is going to need a lot of? Energy. The company must be guaranteed that there will be energy available to power the factory at full capacity. That limits the number of places a plant can be built. Expanding the grid is an option, but guess what that takes? It's all the points we mentioned previously. Maintaining all these assets locally means taking on all the costs associated. Power production facilities and transmission lines need to be maintained to guarantee the factory can operate. The companies are competing for some of the same workers to get different parts of the supply chain built. Your plant cannot be built if the electricians are busy expanding the grid. The grid cannot be expanded if the electricians are working on a production plant. Lastly, where will the workers live? It is of little concern to the company and the ultra-wealthy until they can't get what they want. If you want to build a factory, you are essentially committing to building an entire city. If the plant needs 1,000 workers, then you need housing for those 1,000 workers nearby. This contributes to the dilemma: where will new manufacturing facilities be built? These workers will come with their families. If they don't have a family, maybe they want to start one. They need clean water and food. They probably do not like the air quality if it's polluted by the factory. Another point on theme: who is going to build the homes? Competing interests drive prices up, and it could slow progress. All this can be overcome, not in one day and not with tariffs. Tariffs, as we know, stifle the consumer and the supplier. Tariffs slow the building process down. The financial and operational risks are high. Nope, too far. My scroll wheel is flying today. What role does resilience play in entrepreneurial decision making, and how does Beneke's story illustrate both its strengths and its limits? Resilience is the defining characteristic of an entrepreneur. Resilience is the ability to roll with the punches, the capability to bounce back from difficult situations. Toughness. Resilience contributes to the entrepreneurial decision making process because the person making the decision knows that they are going to face adverse situations, but they will overcome them. Each person has a level of risk tolerance. Each individual is only willing to risk so much. Combining risk with leverage can lead to bigger wins and bigger losses. You're going to need to be extra resilient to take those leveraged hits. You might have to adapt your tactics to meet your strategic goals. You might need to adapt your strategy in order to survive. Beth Beneke is the creator of Busy Baby, a line of baby products. To get initial inventory, she needed capital. She took her idea to Shark Tank and pitched it, but ultimately ended up funding the startup herself. She took her savings and a mortgage on her home to buy the initial inventory. She was confident that the risk was worth the leverage against her small business. Entrepreneurs take on risk when they start a business. At the minimum, the opportunity cost of doing something else with their time. They try to compare all the risks to potential rewards and decide if it is worth it. When I was younger, I thought tolerance was like, how much pain can I put up with to get what I want? What I was doing, though, was risking a lot of time for a potential payoff. I was being persistent. Beth was persistent when she held firm how much of her company she could tolerate giving away for the startup capital. She adapted to the situation by using her own startup funds. She was confident that she would find a way. Beth put her life savings up for collateral. She risked it all. Adapting is amplified by creativity. Before you can take a new path, it must first be created. It must be analyzed, of course, but it's better than no path. There are limits, though. Limits are reached when tariffs are dropped on your business after you mortgage your house. Limits are reached when your tenant destroys your commercial property after you mortgage your home. You can only be so creative and adapt to so much. Persistent work will push through many things, but a tariff on your back is pretty heavy. Explain how sudden changes in international grade tariffs could disrupt small businesses, such as Busy Baby, and force entrepreneurs to reassess strategic priorities, market focus, and long-term growth plans. Sudden is the key word here. In terms of business, a week's notice for a tariff is no notice. When we are discussing industry, we must think at least in years. Sudden tariffs act like a natural disaster to an economy. Your entire strategy may have been hit or none at all. Either way, which sectors of the market you focus on may change, and long-term future growth plans must take into account the tariffs. Tariffs are making everything cost more. This also means your customers have less to spend because their disposable income was spent on essentials. Small businesses' strategic priority likely is changing towards survival. Large companies have more tools at their disposal. They can cut jobs and run smaller crews. Small businesses likely stretched and over-leveraged. They have less capital to weather a storm. A small business has less market share. They are more focused as a new entrant. They'll have to hold something that works to get them through. But they are also small and light. They can pivot and move easier. A large company can pause production of less valuable product lines and focus on ones that succeed. When an entrepreneur is calculating the odds of success on a venture, regressive and outdated tariffs are not normally considered. It takes time to plan and build a business. Planning must be done for the given situation as it is today. Factoring all possible outcomes is unreasonable. Beneke probably would not have started the process at all if the tariffs were already in place. She also might never have considered selling in Australia if business had remained consistent. One perk of a small business is mobility. It seems natural for business to start small, then grow beyond town, state, then country. Starting your business international is terrifying and terrific. An American can pay to have something produced in China, then shipped to Australia where it will be sold. Tariffs hate this one simple trick. Growth plans. Growth plans domestically are going to stall with tariffs. Beth is resilient and persistent. She's changing paths to reach the same goal. In my own business, tariffs are imposed on trading cards imported. Maybe I will start exploring selling Japanese cards in England. Solar panels have tariffs imposed. Construction's paused. How do government trade policies disproportionately impact small versus large businesses? There are more small businesses than large companies. Naturally, the small businesses will be affected by these decisions. In a small business, everything is essential. Owners and operators usually wear multiple hats. Every dollar is stretched. In large businesses, what's a small tariff on the cost of an input? It's just passed down to the customers who do not take the time to renegotiate or they seek alternate suppliers. Large businesses are established. They move slower. What strategic options does Benneke have to sustain Busy Baby under the current tariff constraints? Should she focus on international markets, reshoring, crowdfunding, or policy advocacy? What are the pros and cons of each path? First, she and everyone else should advocate for policy to support small businesses. Innovation, entrepreneurship, and the pursuit of happiness are keystones here. I think that Beth should pursue the international option. Her product is already finished. It just needs to sell. I think that would be a good goal given the situation. She should also try to create a lasting relationship wherever she lands. In the future, she can re-enter the United States either as an importer or to reshore. But today, Busy Baby needs cash. Any crowdfunding should only be considered for survival. A large company could take out a bond. Unfortunately, she doesn't have that option. She's already maxed in credit. In conclusion, thank you for listening. Tariffs are not the answer to fixing our economy. There are trade-offs to reshoring manufacturing versus continuing with overseas manufacturing. Building a new manufacturing facility takes on a lot of risk. Building one doesn't guarantee that the rest of the necessary pieces, labor, energy, and housing, will be there. Tariffs primarily hurt small businesses. They impact small and large businesses by making them rethink strategy, market focus, and growth plans. Companies are more likely to move rather than reshore.